Sculpting Game Store Retail Chapter 2. Now we talk about the overall climate of the store through lighting, carpet, and air conditioning. When we talk about climate, we are also talking about culture. And as human beings, our environment, the lighting, the way the air smells, whether there's dingy carpet or not, those type of environmental factors, they actually influence the mood and comfort level of pretty much every psychological human. It's just something that happens to us, right? So bad air, dim lights, dingy carpet, that sends a meta message. That sends a signal to the customer, don't stay long. That you might not feel comfortable or safe here. And they might not even fully recognize it, but those are the environmental factors that help create how long a stay a customer is willing to have in your store. So we want to keep our lights warm but bright. We want to invest in clean flooring, build procedures that keep flooring clean. You don't want to skip on air conditioning in the summer. Your customers remember the smell, especially that, the tables, if they sit there for a long time. Instead, you want a game store that is cool, clean, well lit, feels professional. The parents can trust it. The players feel comfortable staying at the tables together. That's the goal. So in a game store, our game store, our overhead is partly impacted by the light cost, what we set our AC to, and how often I have to replace a Robo-Rock vacuum that covers our floors every night. And that overhead has to be built into our margins, or the difference between what we can buy at and what we can sell at. Now, we use a Google Nest in our building, so that means that we can control our AC from apps or logging in. And when we run our Google Nest for comfort, when someone walks in the winter and it's 40 degrees outside and they've got a light jacket or a warm jacket, we want them to be able to keep a light jacket on. But people expect to take off a coat when they walk into a building. But if they have to take off a light jacket or their long sleeve shirt or their sweater, they might feel like they want to spend less time in the building. Whether they think it or not, they might think, I'm ready to go back outside to my car and go home and get some hot chocolate. You want the right temperature. So based on that and using kind of the shoulders of giants and looking at research of retail, our ideal temperature for heating is 62. We don't want it to go below 62. Now, we have a range, right? So the bottom is 62 and our top is 75. And in that, we generally find that we don't have to control the temperature much more than that wide range because people acclimate to their temperature outside, right? But at 75, so we're probably not saving the world at that temperature, but we are keeping it cool enough that people don't feel hot in here, that you don't produce a sweat. If you sit at the tables, you'll feel comfortable. Sometimes people feel a little chill in that range of 62 to 75 if we're working in here or if we, sit for a little while. But if you're in here long term as a worker or a player, it's not unreasonable to think that maybe you should bring layers, like a long sleeve shirt. But we also want the people that are coming in from a temperature, if we cool down to 75, but the day has us at 70 or 72, that probably means the outside temperature is closer to that. So coming in to acclimate to it, we probably don't want to force the temperature change too often in there because it's actually going to feel more natural or less of a change, less abrasive, but still fully comfortable within those ranges. So at Mindsculpt Games, our Google Nest keeps us at 62 to 75. Now, if you're thinking about game store retail or any retail in general, and you've done sales before without overhead, I want to give you an idea of what the overhead costs on this. So our electric bill will vary between, December and then the mid months like May, April aren't so bad. And then June and July, I think July is almost always our highest electric bill. And we're in a big building, so we've got 5,000 square foot and about 4,200 of that is retail space. And our biggest electric bills are about 1,300 a month. And that's not terrible, but I want you to consider that we're in a newer building, that our AC is newer, that we own the building. I will have to replace that AC at some point. If I weren't going to have to replace that AC, I'd have to look at my rent costs and whether those might increase. And that overhead can be a sizable chunk, right? Because you're going to have water, we have trash services, you have electric, there's other overheads that you have to look at, but electric's really the biggest one, and it is a variable cost. And when you look at the electric, like if I want to sell this Creato, I need to make a mom comfortable coming into my store. I need good lighting. I need clean carpets. We've got 2 different Robo-Rocks. Those are vacuums that move around on an automated map. And we've got one up front and we've got one in the back, so they cover about half the store. And that happens each night on a cycle, so that every 3 days or so our full store is covered, but every day a third of the store is covered. And we do it with 2 different machines in case one goes down. We were on one machine for a while, and that worked pretty well, but the mapping sometimes gets difficult, and the remapping. So we didn't start with Robo-Rock, we started with iRobot, and that worked pretty well until it didn't. And then when it didn't, the warranty off, I think I went through 5 of those, and remapping it took a little while. And these other Robo-Rocks, they map faster. It's a newer technology type, but their battery doesn't sometimes get them home, or their Wi-Fi reception, or one at the back, even if we switch it out. That one, sometimes we have to find it, right? So there are not only overhead costs in how much I pay for the Robo-Rock and whatever electricity that will cost me, but there's also the overhead cost in planning time, in maintenance time, that I have to map it, that I have to learn how to use the app, that I have to sometimes remap it. There is not a fixed cost on that Robo-Rock. It's not a fixed cost on our overhead for our AC. Those costs can fluctuate, sometimes based on the nature of the technology or the season, and that needs to kind of be baked in to what you buy at and what you can sell at. The marginal difference between your purchase price and your sales price, and then how many things that you buy that you're going to sell that actually create that zone of profit. Because not everything I buy am I going to sell. And honestly, I'm going to tackle this a little bit, right? Like in a small town, we can buy more Magic singles, Pokemon singles than we can sell in our town by quite a bit. And knowing that, I've got to look at my margins on when I can buy them and how much I can sell them for, and then create a purchase price off of that. And I'll get into that later. That's a really big topic. But in talking about creating culture for your retail store through your climate, through your AC, through a $1,300 Wheatland electric bill in July, you need to talk about knowing appropriate pricing. Because when you talk about creating climate, there are some trade-offs, right? You could have a Las Vegas feel with the big bright lights, and those lights cost a lot of money, not only to create but to maintain. Or you could have an Apple iStore feel, where it's, you know, the elite of retail experiences. You walk in and you're like, whoa, this is so cool, and you can pick from 8 products on the shelves. So those environments cost a good amount to try to draw people in. And where a game store will be on that, we should be on the side of quality, we should be on the side of attraction, but we don't necessarily need to be on the side of like Carnival or I sell only $2,000 items, because we're somewhere in between that. So there's some cost benefit analysis on creating your culture through climate, and you need to have a reasonable return on investment for it. You need to be able to see that the environment you're creating is creating success, that you're not spending too much money on lighting, that you're not, you know, setting your climate, your AC levels at levels where people don't shop long enough, or that you're spending too much on the AC because there is a comfort range, and that you don't need to like make sure that it's 58 so that people can wear heavy coats. It's a lot of responsiveness and looking at the numbers, because it's not going to be direct causation on, do I have the right type of lighting? Yes, extra money at the end of the year because this purchase, and this purchase were made just because of the lighting. It's going to be a correlation. It's going to be one of a series of factors. It's an environmental condition that helps create it, and it's going to be harder to track. But what you need to do as a buyer, if you are ordering products for your retail services, if you are buying singles off the market, there's some idea out there that a competitive market for buying Pokemon is that you offer someone 80% of the low price so that you can sell it and make margin off that. Well, your margin's not going to be the remaining 20% unless you're selling in person. And if you're selling in person only, you're lowering your your volume, your scale a little bit. And if you're selling on like TCG Player, well, you've got a base of 13% on your fee, right? But then you've got fixed costs that change that percentage quite a bit if it's a $10 card. Like if you ship in a padded envelope, that's $5 of cost. That's 50% of a $10 card if you choose to go that route. You've got an initiation fee for the credit cards. Then you've got that extra fee on top of it that is the commission fee to the site. All those you need to account for your risk of lost mail, your electric bill, your water bill, your property tax or your rent, and you need to bake that in so one card's not going to pay your rent, right? But if you're only getting 87% from TCG Player and you're paying 80%, you've got this small margin where if the mail gets lost or the electric bill is a summer bill and it's $1,300, you might not be clearing your overhead costs because what you're paying in the resource of buying, which there's a lot of things you can buy out there, might not give you enough margin to hit your break-even cost. Now we're talking about the basics of retail right now. We've talked about our landing zone, the view from the front door. Now we're talking about lighting, AC, creating climate, keeping your carpets clean, making people feel comfortable in the store. All these are really important to retail. But what you've got to realize is while you're thinking about the ideal of retail, that you're also thinking in your head of the break-even analysis, of the cost benefit of creating the climate, of the return on investment, the ROI of creating the climate. Can you effectively create an environment that is plus positive on profit outcomes? Because remember, even though it might sound slimy, if you're going to run a business, you have to have capitalist intent, and you need to mind the numbers, and you need to make sure that what you buy an item at can cover not only the chance of losing the item, being stolen from, it being a fake, but that you also cover your natural overhead that's going to come from carpet, from climate, from AC. Now, we spent like 10 grand when we moved in to change our carpet and get carpet squares. But that's not a cost that I pay once. It's a cost I'm going to have to pay again. I might be able to pull up some squares and replace them, but one day I'm probably looking at like a total carpet replacement and I'll have to pay that cost again. And if I don't mind my numbers and make sure I have enough margin so that I'm not, selling a $50 item and making $5 like a PlayStation controller bought new, that won't cover the overhead in the case of long-term expenditures, $1,300 Wheatland electric bills, or surprise expenditures. And you're getting a little bit of a biased view because having been in business since 2017, COVID shut our doors for a while, right? You also have to account for possible catastrophic events, have your rainy day fund, be able to make sure you're withstanding not just a profit in the month, but that you have built a system that invites people to come repeatedly and make purchases in a climate they enjoy, that also builds structure so you can sustain it. One of the things about creating culture through climate is if you can build a trust that you're long-term, if you can have a business that's expected to, it's already run 8 years and you're hoping to run it 20, you create a part of that climate being longevity. And with longevity, if I plan to operate a business in the same town for 20 years, there's an element of, well, I can't screw up my reputation too bad. I'm not out here to rip people off. I'm not out here to fly by night and run a pop-up in the mall, charge double prices or sell fake product and then run away. So I've got to, as someone who plans to run a business long term, I hope you can trust that I care about the environment of the store, that I'm going to build it for the long term, and that you can trust that this will be here so that you can keep building community with us. So, Sculpting Game Store Retail, Chapter 2, Section 3, Lighting, Carpet, and AC, looking at creating culture through climate, and starting to look at, what we'll view in future chapters, how these kinds of choices affect your overhead costs, and then how you'll have to make owner-level decisions on purchasing and sales price based on not only the product itself, but the overhead you create through your choices of climate and how much customer draw that gives you, how much completed transactions that gives you, and how much margin that leaves you for costs like sales tax, which you have to pay anyway, sorry, not sales tax, property tax, rent, the July electric bill, or carpet replacement when that time comes. Because let's be honest, if your business isn't building enough of a cash flow that you can look at carpet replacement as a real item, you're looking at a business that is already in a state of decay. And as a business owner hoping to build something for your community, it's really your job to prevent that state of decay. That's why you have to have capitalist intent, is because if you want to create a sustainable business, it's not just gaslighting your customers on a 1 or 2 year plan where you fold afterwards. You've got to think, I need to be able to cover this in 10 years or 5 years or 3 years, or I need to be able to stay open if I've got to shut my doors for a week or a month or 3. And to do that, I need to build sustainability. By having the capitalist intent as a business owner, by minding the numbers, you're actually creating a better buffer and a more sustainable experience for your customer by making sure that you can sustain and provide for the long term. We're not a flash in the pan. We're building for something longer, and that means you got to plan it out, build your climate purposefully, and once you make these choices of climate, that you also mind your numbers elsewhere to make sure climate and margin are there creating sustainable profit so you can be in for the long run, even if you've got to look at a full carpet replacement so that you can stay in business operating not with a dingy carpet that is all worn out, but as a business that brings joy to the customer. Those are the goals, and for the goals to be met, you have to be responsible and care about the numbers.